Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Wrestling News Show, where we are on a mission to teach, learn, and remember the history of professional wrestling with everyone that wants to join us. My name is Ryan Joy. This is our 10th Daily Wrestling News Show special covering the Tales from the Territory episodes that are airing every week on Vice. And this was the last episode. And John, what'd you think of the last episode?
I mean, regardless of anything that happened in Mid-South, I knew it was going to be a great episode because look at who was sitting around that table.
Yeah, right.
So
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Jim Ross, Jake Roberts, Michael Hayes, and Ted DiBiase sitting around the table, swapping stories about Mid-South wrestling. So I know, I guess at this point, we could kind of look back at the entire collection of episodes and, the ratings weren't very good for Tales from the Territory. So I don't know that we're really looking at a season 2. I don't know if a season 2 is warranted, really, because they hit all the major promotions. And the only thing I could think of is that maybe they brought in some different people or something to talk about each territory. But they've already kind of hit all the major territories.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe they can, like you said, they can revisit a territory here or there, or maybe do maybe a one-off episode here or there and work it in between a future season of Dark Side of the Ring or something like that. But kind of like they're doing next week with a special after this season wraps up.
Yeah. And so the next week they have this the 9 Lives of Vince McMahon documentary that's airing. And I noted, that they had commentary from Vince Russo and Brian Alvarez in the little commercial bit that they did. But then I also noticed it looked like they were recycling some footage from the Dark Side of the Ring episodes. Like, I know that Jim Cornette line about crossing Hugh Hefner and P.T. Barnum is directly out of the Montreal episode. Okay. I'm pretty sure it's Montreal.
I'm sure there will be some new content there, but the 9 Lives, I'm sure they're going to be talking about multiple scandals, so I'm sure it's all stuff they've touched on before. So yeah, it would make sense that there would be some repeat stuff in there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this episode last night, Mid-South, Mid-South is one of those territories that I never watched any, obviously, but I've heard so many stories from Jim Ross and people of that era that I feel like I kind of knew the territory before we even got to the episode. And Jim Ross retold his story about traveling with Leroy McGurk, and Leroy was on a mission to kill the $1 Million Man because Teddy was dating his daughter Mike McGurk, which I did not make the connection that Leroy McGurk's daughter was the female ref or the female announcer in WWE. Yeah,
she with the red like tux with tux and tails jacket she used to wear.
Yes. Yeah. I didn't make that connection, but there you go. So Jim Ross retold that story. So that was kind of stuff that I had heard before. I loved the Jim Duggan stories that Jake Roberts told. I thought that was really good because when you think about Jim Duggan, you basically think about the bombastic character guy from the WWF years that ran around, waved the flag, threw the 2x4 up in the air, and was made to kind of look like a goof. He was kind of goofy, but he had a few serious programs in WWF. When he was trying to take down Yokozuna and things like that in the early days when we were still in the Cold War. He had some serious programs, but he was kind of a cartoon character in the WWF. But back in this Mid-South, to hear Jake tell the story that Duggan was a legitimate tough guy.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's not that it ever escaped me that Jim was a big guy, a former football player, and looked like he absolutely could handle himself in a bar fight. But he didn't necessarily seem like the kind of guy who would get in a bar fight, at least not to me. And apparently that is quite the opposite of the man who actually existed, especially in the time in the Mid-South.
Jake kind of set up the story. He was talking about Duggan, and he's like, Jim it's Jim. He has like 4 jokes, and he tells them every night. And if you stay with him for a couple of nights, you're going to hear him every night, and he's going to think they're hysterical, and he's going to laugh at all of them. And he likes to tell his jokes. So he's kind of a goofy character in real life. But this story about this great big huge guy comes walking into the bar that they're drinking at, and Duggan says, "I don't want any problems from you, and you won't get any problems from me." And the guy hauls off and starts punching Duggan, and he gets him, and Duggan is wild swinging and stuff because he's drunk and can't see the guy because Duggan was wearing glasses, and the other guy got the first punch in and cut up his face, so Duggan can't see the guy, and he's just throwing haymakers and missing. And Jake's concerned because Duggan's going down, and then Jake's going to have to jump in to kind of protect kayfabe, and he's all concerned about it. So Jim sticks his hand up, and the guy bites down on Jim's thumb, and that was enough for Jim to kind of orient himself and say, "I know where you are now." And one punch, the guy goes heaping down, knocked out cold, and that's kind of the end of the story. I mean, there's a little bit more to the story, but that's pretty much the end of it. And that was probably my favorite story from last night.
And that was my favorite line of the night. Basically, was the guy bites down on Jim's thumb. As you said, there's his own blood is in his eyes. He can't see, but now he's like, "Now I gotcha." Like basically, I know where you are now. Now it's time. And like just not what I would expect from the hacksaw cartoon character that I grew up with in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly. So Mid-South, owned by Cowboy Bill Watts. It was Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi. He was the first promoter to feature a black man on top as babyface, Junkyard Dog. We'll probably talk about that a little bit, but he's alive. He's 83 years old, Bill Watts, and I don't know. It kind of felt funny that he wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly. Now, and I don't mean to bring up controversy here, but this is the same Watts that kind of had a bad name for, like, didn't he have some racist issues? Like, isn't that what kind of like pushed him out of the business?
Yeah, well, it's interesting if you kind of like look at the timeline of things.
Mhm.
Um, Obviously, Watts put Junkyard Dog on top.
Yeah.
Watts spent some time in Ring of Honor, and he had some back and forth with Jim Cornette, and Watts said something to the effect that all men are equal, but some people are better, or something like that. And I don't think it was conceived well, but
Right.
that was in like 2006, and then he went into the WWE Hall of Fame a couple of years later. So he wasn't totally out of the wrestling picture. So,
Okay.
but yeah, it's a good point that he
I
had like
just found it odd that
yeah.
you have that star next to your name, the first guy, not only the first guy to put a black baby face at the top of your company, to get pushback from the NWA. Not that they told him you can't do that, but they kind of looked at him and went like, you're gonna ruin things, like that's not gonna work. But
Yeah.
he felt like he knew his audience, and he turned out to be 100% right, because JYD was as over as anyone in the territory ever was.
And you probably feel the same way I do is when we look at him, we were growing up in the Northeast, and we were WWF guys, and Junkyard Dog was there, and he was an important character on the card, but he was never really a top guy. He was kind of not silly, but he wasn't ever even approaching top guy status. But I have always known through reading Jim Ross biographies and hearing other accounts that in Mid-South, this man drew some money. He put some butts in seats, and he worked on top for a while there, and they were running stadium shows.
Yeah. Well, that was one of the, when in the opening, when you said the territory, Arkansas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Mississippi, when they say that in the beginning of the episode, then I'm waiting for them, like a world class where we're going to hear about the Sportatorium and other, but you knew the buildings they were going to talk about. They worked in Louisiana, and they worked the Superdome.
Exactly.
So that is, that's not small time by any means.
No. The other thing about this territory that they brought up kind of over and over. And it was the first time that it was really brought up, well, alluded to in other episodes, is like this mafioso, uh, mafia parallels to the world of wrestling uh, in the territory days, and how they all the episodes talked about it being protected,
Mm-hmm.
but the business being protected, and what the lengths that they would go to protect the business and protect themselves, their image as tough guys in Mid South. It was basically, you did that or you lost your job. Like,
Yeah.
Watts was not going to put up with anybody losing a fight. He was not going to put up with anybody breaking kayfabe. You had to go all the way with things. So
And just jumping back for a half a second to the Jake and Duggan bar story, the reason Jake started to get uneasy when Duggan went down, not only did he not expect anyone to be able to drop Duggan, he knew he was next up because there was no way he could go back to Cowboy Bill and tell him that Jim was in a bar fight and lost.
yeah,
You were sitting right there too. Why didn't you do something? Like, it was like that. It wasn't even a consideration. If Duggan didn't get back up off the floor, Jake was going to have to get involved, and he wanted no part of it. But he knew, that was Cowboys rules.
yeah, yeah. So we're talking Jake the Snake Roberts here a little bit, and I see that you're wearing a Jake the Snake shirt. At first glance, I just thought it was a Raiders shirt. So yeah, I see now you have it's basically the Raiders helmet, and you got snakes coming out the side.
Yeah,
I am also wearing a Jake the Snake shirt, and if you look quick, you would think it might have been a Randy Orton shirt because it's got
yeah.
the snake coming out like that. But oh, good times with Jake here. So, um, a couple of interesting Junkyard Dog stories on here. I liked the one where they talked about Ted DiBiase, because up until DiBiase told this story, which was probably 35 minutes into the show,
Yeah.
he was just kind of a guy nodding at
Yeah.
the table. He didn't really say much of anything, but finally they got around to, like, okay, why is, he's a legend of wrestling, but why is he here?
Mhm.
Finally, they kind of got around to it, is that DiBiase broke in Mid South,
Yeah.
and he broke in as a baby face. And even when they showed pictures of Ted in that era, I mean, you take one look at this guy and you know he's a heel. I mean, he just has that vibe that just exudes him.
Clean shaven Ted, you're like, you almost don't recognize it, but the minute if he's even got a 5 o'clock shadow, you're like, that's a dastardly dude.
Yeah, right. And I guess, he was kind of buddy buddy with Junkyard Dog and whatnot. And Ted goes to Ernie Ladd, who is the booker in Shreveport for Mid South, which, by the way, Junkyard Dog working on top, Ernie Ladd as a booker. Bill Watts was not afraid to cross the lines, I guess, a little bit. But in any event, so Ted DiBiase goes to Ernie Ladd and says, I think I found your next big heel, and it's me. And Ernie Ladd all of a sudden is like, that is a great idea, because nobody would see it coming. And DiBiase as a face, he was over, and people wouldn't see him betraying Junkyard Dog. And so the way they worked it, it sounds like they had the plans in motion for a couple of months
Kind of
prior to the turn. And because it was like 2 months prior that DiBiase was in a match, and he ended up punching the ring post. And at account of that, he put on a cast and he had a glove. And then for some reason, months down the road, he's got the cast, he's got the glove on and everything, and for some reason he's working a babyface match with the Junkyard Dog, a friendly exhibition, if you will, for the championship.
Yeah.
And DiBiase rolls out of the ring. Junkyard Dog does the nice thing, helps him back in, helps his friend, the commentator even says. And while the referee is looking at the Junkyard Dog coming in, DiBiase loads up the glove with some lead or whatever, and strikes Junkyard Dog, taking him down, winning the title, and turning heel. And apparently, this was a huge heat for DiBiase.
Yeah, well, yeah, one punch starched him, and the JYD sold it beautifully. Just pin straight, hits the floor, and you got to think, DiBiase made a point of saying, like, I had the cast, then I had the rap, then I went to the glove. There's really no point for the glove, but he was getting the audience used to having the glove, even though the glove was technically serving no purpose
Yeah.
until it was time for it to serve its purpose. And it caught everyone off guard. And, kind of one of those things where you have to think that the audience was kind of slack jawed. Like, oh my God, what just happened? And that kind of situation brings monster heat.
Yeah, and to make matters, to make strong heat hotter, they worked a career-ending match or a loser leaves town match, and everybody thought that the JYD would win, and DiBiase won.
Mm.
But immediately, Junkyard Dog's back the next week under a hood and full bodysuit, and nobody is even questioning the fact that it's Junkyard Dog. But in any case, that was just one of the many stories from the show last night, and it was one of the big JYD ones, talking about essentially you make DiBiase as a heel, working off of the goodwill that the Junkyard Dog had as a face in the territory. So, yeah, I like that. I like that story.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, they say, personal issues draw money, but even if it's not, okay, it's not, they didn't necessarily have personal issues, but because they had that personal connection, these guys were friends, that makes for a great heel turn. So, and then that makes for a great rivalry. It draws money, and away you go.
Yeah, yeah, and you're right. When you draw the thread or weave the thread through all 10 episodes, this person that they brought it up in the very first episode, Memphis, about personal issues draw money, and Jerry Lawler and Jeff Jarrett are sitting there talking about that kind of stuff, and then that carries straight through, and then here you are at the end, and Jim Ross hits the nail on the head here and puts the last final point on it when he says, people ask him all the time, is it what's better, personal issues or championships to sort of draw money? And they all four of the legends at the table all say it's personal issues, and then they lead into the DiBiase story.
Right. Yeah, because you could put a belt on anyone, and I mean, we see people bitch and moan all the time about the WWE, especially, but you see them put a belt on somebody, and people are just like, "Ugh, why'd they put the belt on that?" Like, they don't care about that guy, and they don't care that he's the champion.
Yeah.
But if you have a compelling story on the undercard where two people absolutely hate each other, that's going to draw attention. That's going to draw money.
Yep.
And we see it over and over and over again in the history of wrestling.
The other interesting story was one that Jake told about working with Muhammad Ali. And the reason I bring it up is because Jake would go on to have an enormous career, right? In WWE, he was, sort of the top. There was Hogan at the top, and then you had about four guys that were kind of like in that second, third babyface rung, and he was always one of those guys. And but Jake said the greatest moment of his entire career was right here in Mid-South. He got to work an angle with Muhammad Ali. Now, he's working a match against the Snowman, and Jake has John Nord in his corner. Snowman has Muhammad Ali in his corner. Well, Snowman's getting the best of Jake, and so Nord jumps in the ring, and Jake starts jaw-jacking with Ali. Jake pulls Ali up on the apron, and Ali takes a swipe at Jake, and he connects, and Jake stumbles back. He comes back two more times, and on the third one, he stumbles back into Snowman's finisher and Snowman gets the win. But what was supposed to happen is that Jake was supposed to take that punch from Ali and go flat out, and Ali was supposed to be the person who hit the death knell here, but Jake didn't, and he didn't sell those punches from Ali. And afterwards, Bill Watts reamed him out.
Yeah.
But it was, after 20 minutes later, whatever, Muhammad Ali walks into the locker room and says, you're a very smart young man. You'll be seeing those fans again next week. Good luck. So Ali was smart. He understood the business enough to know why Jake didn't want to sell those punches.
Sure. And yeah, and Jake, the funny thing was Jake had ideas about taking it even a step further. Like
Yeah.
he knew that this was going to be the opportunity to make his name and career forever. And I think maybe it was DiBiase who said, like, Jake was, rattling on backstage about, I'm gonna shoot on Ali and drop him with a DDT.
Yeah.
And like, could you imagine if he had gone off script to that degree? You
I'll
know,
tell you what, make it good.
yeah.
Because if you, because if Ali gets up and punches you, it's not going to be you making your career.
And as Jake, as you alluded to, as Jake, after getting chewed out by Cowboy Bill, he's sitting there, and when Ali comes in, he's not sure what to expect. Jake, yeah, he's not
Yeah.
sure is Ali going to come in and tell him how pissed he is that Jake didn't make a fool out of him, but lessened his effect. And Ali comes in, and he was apparently perfectly fine with it, and it
Yeah.
all worked out for Jake.
Yeah. So, good stories from last night. Good stories throughout the entire series. Like I mentioned, kind of in the beginning, I don't know if they're going to really do another a series. I don't know if, with those ratings, I don't know if Vice would renew them, and even if they did renew them, I don't know what they would talk about.
Right.
But maybe they'll surprise me, or they'll pivot into some sort of other series. But definitely enjoyed everything that they did. And when you look at the legacy of Mid South, they they did what a lot of the other territories tried to do. They tried to hang on. They tried to they rebranded themselves as UWF to try to not sound so regional.
Right.
Uh, and Jim Ross even said that at the end, their TV ratings were incredible, but there was something going on with the oil industry at the time, and people just couldn't afford to buy tickets. So they sold to Crockett, and then Crockett just didn't know what to do with them, which is a familiar thing that you'll hear always, right? Like just like Vince didn't really know what to do with WCW once he bought it. So
Yeah. But it feels so weird because the amount of talent that came through Mid South is not altogether different from the incredible amount of uh, talent that came through the Carolinas with Crockett. Why wouldn't he know what to do with them? Like, I
yeah,
guess they were kind of trying to keep them as their own entity, and maybe that's what screwed it up because he couldn't concentrate on it enough. But knowing that they were linked to Crockett, you would think that would give them the power to really maybe go up against Vince, at least for a little while, until he wound up buying everyone out.
yeah,
But
yeah,
just didn't work out, and that's a shame.
yep. All right. That said, I think, John, that's probably good for today. Anything else from this episode last night that you want to, or the series in general, that you want to talk about?
No, just the fact that I thoroughly enjoyed it, and like we said in the beginning, as a Northeast guy, I knew of the territories. I, off the top of my head, could name a handful of them and who necessarily came out of them. But this was very educational for me. There's a lot of stuff that I did not know, or I had heard of the territory and then kind of knew nothing about it. So I absolutely enjoyed this series. Not and like you said, I don't know where else they go because they touched on all the major ones, but even if this stands alone as just these 10 episodes, thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm glad that what is it, $7 promotions help put it
Yeah.
together.
The one thing I guess I would say is that it's a little hard to, uh, you're basically, all these stories are coming off of people's memories of the
Sure.
stories. There was no real history
Mhm.
written about the territories. Like, we might be able to go back and find some, WWE owns an incredible amount of the tape library. Not all the territories, but they
Sure.
have most of this stuff they own. But there's so much history that was not recorded, and it's kind of sad. Other industries, the history is all there, it's all recorded, whatever. Not so in the territories. It's really this, going through and hearing firsthand accounts is the best we can do. And honestly, these guys were telling stories that were 40 plus years old.
Yeah.
Some of these were like 1980, 81, 82, these stories. So their firsthand account, it's no question that there was some tall tales being told.
Sure.
And when in the case of Polynesian Pro, they were not even telling firsthand stories. They were telling, stories about Peter Maivia and, in the bar fights and stuff like that with the, what's his name? He messed up his eye. Billy Robinson, right? Yeah. And those weren't even firsthand accounts. It was just like, I heard this and I heard this, and the story was passed down. But so in a lot of the history is a little sketchy on some of this stuff. So it's good that we have them together telling stories. Firsthand accounts are definitely better than the second and third. So.
Absolutely, yeah, and that is the history of history. And it's almost kind of perfect for the territories, because the territories are the definition of old school, and that's how history was passed down from generation to generation, was people sitting around telling stories. So it just works.
Yeah. All right. If you're not subscribed to the show on Apple, Spotify, or whatever your podcast player is, I encourage you to do that. We're going to put this out as a special episode, but we have an entire lot of episodes coming out. We have all scheduled out through the month of December here. So, John, what came out today?
Today was Final Battle 2014.
Ah, right.
Tomorrow we have the return of the Slammies.
Mm.
And then we wrap up the week with Vengeance Day 2001 and a very important 3-part main event.
That's right. That's right. So it's fun. You look at these three. Adam Cole and Jay Briscoe working on top at ROH 2014. The Slammy Awards tomorrow is all about the Superstar of the Year, who happens to still. This is a 2008 topic, and you're talking about somebody who is still active today. And to be honest, you're only going about halfway back in his career when you get to 2008. So,
and he also has a big part in the very next episode.
That's right. The Friday episode, it's what did X person do on this day in 2001, and you'll know it because this person has never shut up about it since.
He's never let us forget, and rightly so. Damn it.
That's right. All right, that's enough for today. But do subscribe to the audio version of this show so that you can hear all those interesting topics. We have a whole month worth of stuff coming up and beyond into the new year. So, John, we'll see everybody tomorrow.
Until next time.